The balance breakdown is back in your eardrums, on your eyeballs, or wherever you listen to it. I don't think there is too much other ways that you can listen or view us, Harry, but if there is, let us know. I hope everyone is doing well. I'm here, as always, Ian O'Neill with Harry Powell. We're going to break down the UFC São Paulo card from this past weekend, which had a bunch of talking points, a bunch of prospects, and a couple of questions that we had before the event were answered as well. Jailton Almeida took on Derrick Lewis in the main event. Nicolas Dalby, Gabriel Bonfim, co-main event. Plus another couple of decent fights spread throughout the card. Not all decent. We'll get into each and every one of them. Harry, I normally ask for your overview. I'm going to go straight in at the top here on the balance breakdown. Jailton Almeida defeats Derrick Lewis by unanimous decision. A good performance, I would say myself. In the terms of, hear me out, a good performance in just getting the job done. You know, it wasn't probably how we wanted it to go. It wasn't probably how we expected it to go, having watched the first round play out and see him taking down and just toss around Derrick Lewis like a child inside that octagon, which was crazy to see. But he was trying for the head and arm choke. He was trying to get Derrick Lewis out of there. And credit to Derrick Lewis, he stuck strong and kind of, in his defense, wore Jailton Almeida out as the fight went along. But look at a good performance in terms of this could have been a potential banana skin for Jailton Almeida. And given it being short notice and everything like that, it's a good test. He will have learned a lot of things, but you're not, based off your reaction, Harry, you're not totally convinced on the Brazilian's performance overall. What did you see in that main event?
I thought it was horrid, to be honest. I think that, you know, if you're looking for short notice opponents and you're a grappler, Derrick Lewis is the best name that you can even possibly think about having as a short notice opponent, because previously he's not had a great gas tank. He can hit hard until the very end, fine, but we've seen him quite literally hands on knees, bent over, panting in fights before. We have seen him gas many times in the octagon, and we know that his grappling defense and his submission defense isn't great, right? So if you're somebody like Jailton Almeida, and you're looking at a short notice opponent, Derrick Lewis is your absolute shoe-in man, and in round one, I completely agree. I was very impressed with the takedown itself. I was very impressed with the immediacy with which he was able to move from transitions to transitions, guard passes into mount, etc., etc. It was all great stuff. The head and arm triangle was disgusting, absolutely horrendous mechanics whatsoever. Just, the whole fight left me incredibly confused. The first confusion comes in, why not try and apply submissions properly? That's the first thing, right? Secondly, there were moments throughout the contest where Jailton Almeida could have looked for arm bars from the mount. He could have really started to unload in the mount on elbows, on hammer fists, on whatever, like fight-ending intentions on shots, which I didn't see at all in any of the shots. A lot of them were hurtful. A lot of them were damaging. They scored fantastically well. No problem with that. But I didn't really feel like any of them had fight-ending intentions to them. He had Derrick Lewis's back for a considerable portion of that fight. Didn't really commit to any chokes. Didn't really commit to any hand-fighting sequences in order to look for chokes. Just felt very non-committal throughout the entire fight. And I just don't understand why. Was the motivation... He had a ton of injuries during this camp, wasn't able to train the gas tank as well as, you know, he thought he was going to be able to or wanted to. And so he had to be conservative. If that's the answer, fine, no problem. You managed to do what you do. Was it because he feared not being able to control Derrick Lewis? Because in a way, it felt like that, right? There were moments when he was in the mount and he wasn't committing to upper body frames. He wasn't committing to upper body pins. He was just like holding his chest way high up above Derrick Lewis in similar positions. Like he rode the Dagestani handcuff really well, the wrist ride, Dagestani handcuff, whatever. He rode that really, really well, but never really committed to a pinning position. When he was in side control, there was no cross-face pressure. There was no like covering of the hips or getting an underhook or whatever. And part of that feels to me as though Jailton Almeida was fearful of being aggressively bridged over or pushed away, or Derrick Lewis exploding and leaving Jailton Almeida in a bad position, which we saw in the fourth round when Derrick Lewis was on top after Jailton Almeida fell off the back and the armbar, and Jailton then had to work very hard in order to get back to a dominant position. And I feel one of those two scenarios is probably right. But when you are a guy that's rising, and the illustrious contender over on SevereMMA Patreon, SevereMMA, go on, SevereMMA/pints, go and sign up there. But like, if you get a episode of the contender, we should be talking about you, right? We should be thinking about you in lofty situations.
A little bit, and there's been a couple of hit and miss ones, Harry, in our defense. But I mean, a lot of the questions that we had with Jailton Almeida were, what happens if he takes someone down and can't submit them, or what happens? We didn't really get this question yet. What happens if he doesn't take, or has the inability to take somebody down? I mean, he had the ability to take Derrick Lewis down. I think that's why the Curtis Blades fight was so intriguing, because we would have asked ourselves the question, what would he have done if Curtis Blades can stop the takedowns? And we don't really have the answer to that, but we do have the answer to what happens if he takes the fight down and is unable to secure the submission. Well, not a whole lot, really, to be honest. There wasn't a whole lot that was going on. Now, you're going to be critical of him based off our kind of predetermined opinion that, we figure that this guy can be a champion within the division. But I think this fight would prove he still needs a little bit more time. Calling for Cyril Gane is a good call out, but I don't know necessarily if he's ready for that yet. I think it's a good stylistic matchup for him, that being said, but like, you're going in and you're not able to submit a guy that's only ever been submitted twice in his career so far. So, I mean, there is that from Derrick Lewis. He doesn't really have any great technique behind his defense, just raw strength. And do you feel that there was a little bit of tentativeness from Jailton Almeida, Harry, based off the fact of the raw power that Derrick Lewis possesses? We obviously know the raw power he possesses on the feet. He still packs a punch when he's off on his back, and of course when he's on top. And I think what you said is the fear of the bridge off, and a fear from maybe going from the mounted position where you can bridge off and end up in guard position for Jailton Almeida. That's not a great position to be in if you're fighting a guy like Derrick Lewis, though, is it?
No, it's not. Do I think there was tentativeness without a shadow of a doubt? Like the way that he was approaching those dominant positions was horrendous. Like if you're in a mount position and Marc Goddard is asking you to do more work, there is a serious problem here.
Yeah.
And like, is the answer, is Jailton trying to play the long game, which is in those first 3 rounds, he is trying to force Derrick Lewis to consistently be in horrendous positions and make Derrick Lewis bridge him and make Derrick Lewis start to build back up and drag him back down and put him in bad spots to tire Derrick Lewis out? Because if that was, then why did we see the 4th and 5th rounds that we saw?
Yeah, it didn't really work out. Like, and actually kind of worked out a little bit to the opposite as well, where Jailton was getting a little bit tired towards the end of the fight, wasn't he?
This is why I kind of lean on my first conspiracy, which was I wonder whether he just was laden with injuries going into this camp. And because it was Sao Paulo and because it was a main event and because he was the guy, he felt obliged to stay in. That's not uncommon, right? We have seen plenty before, especially when you're the home guy. We have seen plenty before fighters go in more hampered than they usually would be because of the fear of the repercussions from the UFC. But I don't understand how, when you are the person constantly attacking positions, you're the one getting more tired than the guy on bottom. That shouldn't happen. Like, that shouldn't happen. And so I wrote in my notes, like, are we dealing with an injury here? Because if he's unwilling to go for submissions like arm bars? Are we dealing with a hip injury? Are we dealing with some form of leg injury? Because he was willing to look for a head and arm in the first round, but was unwilling previously, subsequently to look for those submissions again. When he was on the back, there was no attempt of a body triangle, though I'm not sure you could body triangle Derrick Lewis. He's fucking massive. But, I don't know. Like, it was such a weird performance. If you look at the scorecards and it's 10-8, 10-8, 10-8, 10-8, whatever, to then look at the actual fight, I don't know. It was a weird one, a really weird one.
It was. I think your criticism is fair based off who we thought Jailton Almeida possibly may be heading into the fight. Now, will it be injuries? Would it be short notice? There was a stage there where, he had to deal with a short notice opponent in Lewis coming in there. Did he have enough time to make adjustments? Did he get a little bit overconfident in thinking that he was going to be able to handle Lewis and not have to deal with rounds 3, 4, and 5? Those are all questions for Jailton Almeida. What he did do is he went and he got the win. Look, like you said, on paper, it looks a lot better than what it was watching live. But yeah, begs the question, what next for Jailton Almeida? He called out Cyril Gane, as I already said. Who do you feel should be his next opponent? I think I know the answer to this already, but I'll still ask you it.
I'd give him Cyril Gane.
Would you?
I'd give him Cyril Gane because it feels like he either needs to find out the hard way, right? And if Cyril Gane gets taken down and not finished, well, his stand-up and the problems he's going to offer Jailton on the feet are far more severe than Derrick Lewis.
Yeah.
And so he's going to find out one way or the other, right? If he can take Cyril, because that's the main event, right? If he takes Cyril down for 5 rounds and doesn't finish him, I don't know, Chief.
But he could do that, and that's the thing. And then you're dealing with a guy who's up in the top 2, top 3 of the division and knocking on the door of a title shot, which I honestly do not think at this stage he is ready for yet. That's why I think you rebook the Curtis Blades fight. I think that's good. It's a good litmus test, I think, to see, I think there's a good chance we see in that fight him being the nail on occasion, whereas at most of his fights we see him being the hammer. I think Curtis Blades offers some problems for him in the grappling department in terms of, I feel he would be able to, somewhat keep Jailton Almeida off him. And I just want to see Jailton Almeida forced into a situation where he's almost forced to strike here, and I'm interested to see how he deals with there, because like you said, Harry, he's almost coming into a situation where he's going to have to deal with that scenario now, with the level that he's at, the position that he's in the rankings, and who he's going to be facing in the future, whether it be Curtis Blades, whether it be Cyril, whether it's Pavlovich in a little while, Tom Aspinall, whoever we're talking about. When it comes to the heavyweight division, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Jailton Almeida. But we shall move on to the co-main event, and lots to discuss in this fight. Just an absolutely tremendous performance here, Harry, from Nicolas Dalby, who was the severe spotlight this week over on SevereMMA.com. I'm going to give you the floor to discuss exactly why.
I mean, the thing that struck me, right, outside of the technicalities of the fight or the determination or whatever, because oftentimes that severe spotlight is a technical breakdown, right? It is a discussion about why certain things happened, whether it was a decision or a knockout or a submission, whatever it was. It's often a technical discussion. This one wasn't, though, and it wasn't because it's very rare, I think, that you see a fighter. I mean, it's super rare. I shouldn't even say I think it's very rare. It's super rare that you see a fighter manage to mature as a human, mature technically, and then still be in their athletic prime. Like, I think GSP and Mighty Mouse are probably the only 2 that we've ever seen do it. Maybe Khabib. I don't think we can say that John Jones matured enough as a human, right? Certainly technically, certainly in his skills, certainly in his athletic prime. But as a human, I'm not sure that's the case. And so I think those 3 names are probably the only 3 that we can talk of. That's incredibly rare. And somebody like Dalby, who, who has matured so beautifully in the last sort of 3 years or so, coming off the removal from the UFC, going and battling the demons that he did, fighting his way back through cage warriors, getting a second stint in the UFC, and really being able to cherish that second stint in the UFC, and really, I think, being ready for it as a human. Right, like he's in his late 30s now, and so it's certainly not the athletic prime that we were talking about, but he's gotten to a position where his skills are what they are. He will still be adding incremental improvements, of course, but Nicolas Dalby's not making vast leaps or bounds technically. And so it's the beauty of the maturation of the person, of his self-awareness and his self-assuredness. And he went into that fight with Bonfim, and it was very much and we hear fighters say this all the time, but they don't really mean it. Is like, I'm going to go out on my shield or I'm going to go home with it, And
Yeah.
he was so aware that Bonfim probably was technically better than him. Probably.
Oh, not. I would say, like, I was going to even go down the road, Harry, and saying that Dalby put his ego completely to the side and accepted that, if you were to break this down technique per technique, that Bonfim probably was going to be the more technical, most certainly the most technical fighter that he would have faced in quite some time. And he left his ego at the side, and he was comfortable with himself to decide that, okay, he might be better in all of these other avenues, but he is not going to fucking outwork me. He's not going to out cardio me. And I don't know whether he can make it into round 2 or round 3, because he doesn't give his opponents too much of a time. So I can imagine what might have been going through his and his team's head is like, let's get through the first 5 minutes here and let's see what happens. And it was a dodgy first 5 minutes, it has to be said. Bonfim was on top, he was in control, but Dalby remained cool, he remained calm and composed, and he remained confident as well. You know what I mean? That's a big thing that needs to be said about when you're inside. You can have your confidence taken from you in a split second, but you have to stay true to your game plan. You have to stay true to knowing where you're better or where your best is. And I think Dalby done all of that so well on Saturday night in the co-main event.
I think it's even deeper than that. Like, I don't think it's anything to do with even just knowing where he's better or whatever. He just went in and accepted entirely that this fight was what it was. And he was going to do whatever it took for him to win it until he couldn't win it anymore. And that was either because the referee stepped in or because he just ran out of time. And there is a level of humility, like you said, he separated himself from his ego. There's a level of humility, there's a level of acceptance of a situation, and there is a level of just raw bastardness that it takes to be able to achieve something like that. And Dalby went in, and you're right, that first round was dicey, right? Dicey. If you had another 2 minutes on that round, we could be talking about a very different result here. But he went in, and it's the definition of dragging somebody into deep waters. And it wasn't even technically, it was all mental. And I wrote in the article that it felt to me as though Bonfim's soul, his will melted. It wasn't his gas tank. It wasn't technically. It was just that he could not get a breath. And Dalby drowned him with the confidence, with the self-assurance, and obviously with knees and elbows and punches and whatever. But there was a drowning, and it was a philosophical breaking that I think we saw from Bonfim more than we saw, Dalby overcoming. And there's a real beauty to that. And that was why we wrote about him. Just an unbelievable performance.
Oh, really good. For a guy who's been through the trials and the tribulations, Harry, it was brilliant to see him going in there and just, you can't even say it reeling back the years. He just went in there and was Nicolas Dalby. That's who he was. He went in there and got the job done. And look at taking out a guy previously undefeated, 15-0, up and coming prospect. Bonfim would have been lined up for a ranked opponent with a win, I'm sure. It's got to go to Dalby at this stage. Who do you want to see him take on in your next fight?
It depends how we want to do this, right? A lot of the welterweight division is already booked. And the guys that aren't booked, a lot of them are just absolute murderers. So the two names I have, one came from Darren over on Twitter, fair play to him. He asked for Gunny Nelson. I don't have a huge problem with Gunny Nelson. But does Dalby want to fight down? Nelson's not been super active in the last couple of years, right? Does Gunnar Nelson even still want to fight? I don't know. Or the other option was Kevin Holland. Now, Kevin Holland and Nicolas Dalby is an absolute barn burner. I think Kevin Holland again is probably technically better than Nicolas Dalby, but what Kevin Holland turns up, because if Kevin Holland turns up slightly checked out, Dalby will drown him over 3 rounds, or if they do it as like a fight night main event. I hope they don't, because if they do a co-main event for a fight night very similar to this one, Dalby can drown him over 3 rounds, like can absolutely drown him. And that's a massive win for Nicolas Dalby, a massive win if he beats Kevin Holland. And so those are my 2 options, really. I like both of them.
Yep, I like those as well. I'm just happy to see Nicolas Dalby still out there doing the damn thing at this stage of his career. All the credit in the world to him. We'll just briefly touch on the Rodrigo Nascimento versus Dontel Mays. Harry, we're back to the mid-card mediocrity. Are we going to get the wave of death for this fight, I wonder? You're getting it. We're getting it. I got to move on relatively quickly when the wave of death happens. This was not a great fight. This is historically not a great fight, and this card was no different. A middleweight, or a middle of the road, mediocre heavyweight, middle of the card fight night slot for Nascimento, who took home a unanimous decision pretty easily over Dontel Mays. Nothing too much to write home about. Can't see too much of a bright future for each of these guys, but nonetheless, the Brazilian got the win in that fight and moves on to take on whoever the hell he wants to. We shall stop at another Brazilian. That's Caio Borralho, who defeated Abus Magomedov by unanimous decision. Harry, we came into this one with a couple of questions over Abus Magomedov. We kind of know who Caio Borralho is now and what the UFC want of him. They're looking to kind of, like I said, shoehorn him up into the middleweight rankings, up in to kind of be the next possible contender there. Went out and got the job done, but I mean, it wasn't really that impressive, to be honest. I mean, we got a better look at Abus Magomedov here as well, who had some highlights throughout the fight, but never really looked like he was going to take the fight home. Harry, what was your assessment on this fight overall?
So my first note of round 1 is, this is about both of these levels, lads. Like, these lads' levels, sorry. Like, I don't think we're going to see Magomedov anywhere near the level that he had to go to fight Sean Strickland. And obviously we saw how that went, right? Both are tidy enough, but limited fighters. I was impressed that Caio Borralho chose not to just go to his strengths and take the fight down and just effectively do a Jailton Almeida, because I do think he could have done that. There were certainly opportunities in the fight where he had Magomedov off balance and he could have shot and certainly taken the fight down and worked from there. And so I will absolutely give him credit for wanting to test his stand-up and committing to testing his stand-up, and then going out there and actually winning based on purely testing his stand-up. I think he warmed up after round 1. Round 1 was pretty sloppy from both of them.
It was.
Round 2, he showed a better jab. And then round 3, when he tired Magomedov out, he just teed off on him, really. And I don't think we can take too much from that 3rd round, given that he had just exhausted Magomedov, which that seems to be a real problem for Abus Magomedov, is that he has an okay gas tank in round 1, diminishing gas tank in round 2, and then basically nothing there in round 3. But look, I'll give Caio Borralho credit. He's trying. He's definitely trying to add things to his game, and he's definitely trying to go in there when the spotlight is definitely on him, and he is looking to add strings to his bow. And so I absolutely cannot fault him for that. What the UFC do and how they matchmake him kind of is out of his hands in a lot of ways, right? But
yeah, he tried to he tried to match himself up with Dricus du Plessis. He was definitely reaching for the stars with that one, Harry. Obviously, Dricus du Plessis has been matched up now with Sean Strickland. That will go down on Toronto on the Toronto card in January. So he's definitely not getting Dricus du Plessis, Harry. Who do you want to see him getting next? Who do you feel he deserves to get, or what test would you like to see him have after this one?
I've got 2 names. One is Nassourdine Imavov.
Yep, I like that
The
one.
other one is Jack Hermansson.
Jack Hermansson, yeah. Yep, I'm down with those two solid tests. I mean, yeah, I'm definitely down for that. I mean, two solid grapplers too as well, so he will be forced. I think Imamov will be Imamov, if we were to get a similar enough fight that we got on Saturday night, would be a good test for Borralho in terms of, he'd probably stuff the takedowns, and he's a little bit more to do on the feet than Abus Magomedov, in my opinion. So, yeah, interesting ones there. And Hermansson, obviously, for obvious reasons as well, tough to take down, will kind of force a stand-up battle. But yeah, I like it. I mean, I wasn't that impressed. It was all right, but at the same time, I was sitting here a couple of years back or months back and saying that I wasn't really impressed with Sean Strickland, and anything can happen, and especially in the middleweight division as well. We just don't know with some of these guys. And look at Borralho is trending in the right direction, but I would feel I need to see a little bit more from him if I think he's going to take out some top competitions. But Hermansson, Imamov, they're definitely good ones that we could see next, and hopefully we do get to see it. I think, talking about guys, Harry, as we move on to the next one, of promise and guys that are going to be moving up the rankings, I think Elves Brener is a guy that we need to be talking about a little bit more, coming off from one of the comebacks of the year in his last fight, comes out here and absolutely starches Kaynan Kruschewsky. That's a tough one, isn't it, Harry? Kruschewsky.
Yeah. Look, Brener is a really interesting one in that, this was obviously at 165, so it was a catch weight of 10 pounds up from his normal weight class, but he looked in shape for this. Kruschewsky did not look in shape for this whatsoever. Kruschewsky gave some interesting looks. It certainly wasn't over and back just a Brener blowout, but Brener was starting to get the timing. He was starting to add some lovely low kicks. He was starting to piece up the legs. He was going to the body nicely, and then he was looking for that check left hook. And when it landed, I mean, we only saw 3 minutes of fighting, right? And one thing that we get with Elves Brener is lots and lots of action. What we get with Elves Brener is him constantly trying to chop at people, whether it be head, body, or legs. And so he's certainly an interesting all-action fighter. I don't know where his skills top out. I don't know where his ceiling tops out. I think there's probably going to need to be maybe a slight edge taken off the level with which he is willing to put his chin out there in order to land some shots. And I have it's interesting to me. I have a name that I think is going to be, it's a fuck it and find out fight, but maybe not too scary of a name. But Elves Brener, for as long as he's in the UFC, is going to be in fantastically fun fights.
Yeah, so any names that stand out to you that you'd like to see him? Obviously, a move down to lightweight would be ideal for him on the next. Someone like, I mean, look at, he's already gone in against Tugov. He's gone in against Kutaladze as well. Who's the name?
It's Terrence McKinney.
Oh, I was going to say McKinney. I was going to say him. I swear to God, yeah. That's one that, that would be a fun ass fight. That's one that we could guarantee that you could bet the under and probably get paid out on that. Two gunslingers in the lightweight division. I love that fight. It was generally the one I was thinking of myself, and a perfect introduction back into the 155-pound division for Brener. But yeah, it's at the stage now. Obviously, this was probably a short notice one. Elves Brener was supposed to take on Esteban Ribovic. Obviously, that fight fell through, so we put this one together at 165 at a catch weight. So it can be forgiven, and it was definitely the right move not to kind of force these guys to cut weight at the last minute. Very exciting times for Elves Brener, who, has made waves in 2023 so far. That's probably the last time we will see him this year, but definitely one to look out for. Definitely one of these fun fighters. Like I said, will he be top 5? Will he be top 10? It's hard to know at this stage, but Harry, at only 26 years of age, he's got plenty of time to make those adjustments and move on up the rankings as well. So there is that, and we shall move on to another fight. We kind of set this up as one of the fights of the night, and it turned out, definitely on paper as one of the fights of the night. Lots of knockdowns, 10-8 round, a little bit of a comeback, over and back, and we ended up with a majority draw between Rinat Fakhretdinov and Zaleski dos Santos. Crazy fight. Probably the correct result. That being said, curious to hear your thoughts, Harry.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I score that first round to 10-8, frankly. I think Fakhretdinov looked fantastic, but I just think Dos Santos did enough to make it a 10-9.
Well, all three judges did score that 10-9. What happened was Alessio Zaleski got the 10-8 from two of the three judges in round 3. That's right, yeah.
Makes sense. So
yeah,
don't listen to me at all. Because to me, I scored it at 10-9 and so did everyone else. But I am more than happy with I say more than happy. I'm happy with a 10-8 in round 3. I think it was a close enough fight, and it came close enough that when that knee landed and dropped Rinat Fakhretdinov, that there was a ton of damage that he took near the end. Round 2 was a fucking crazy close round. I did not know how to score that, and I went to watch it back, and I scored it first for Rinat and second for Dos Santos. So, I mean, a very, very, very close round in my
judges
book.
were split on the night as well with that one too, Harry. I mean, so it's definitely forgivable. That was a crazy one, and yeah, round. I mean, it was the second round was the closest. It's probably defined this fight. Round 3 was pretty straightforward, like you said, with the knee and the follow up, and a good battling performance from Alessio Zaleski dos Santos as well, man, because he got dropped on almost the first exchange, I think, wasn't it? I think it was
13 seconds when he was dropped.
He almost Fakhretdinov almost got his guy out of there early, like he did with Kevin Lee. But in fairness to Alessio Zaleski, showed his toughness there, battled through and got the draw, and that was an excellent fight. We said it was fight of the night. I'm sure it got fight of the night. I'll have to check the performance bonuses here. Yeah, performance of the night for. Oh no, they didn't get. Whew,
No,
strange.
Get it.
That is crazy. That's crazy that fight didn't get any rewards. But anyway, we shall move on. That was a draw, Harry. So we've got to run that back again, don't we?
So I've written in my notes, no problem with the rematch. If they don't want to do the rematch and they want to break it off and match each of the individual fighters, I wouldn't mind. Now, you're not going to like this, but because of how much the 175-pound division, 170 division is matched, I wouldn't mind seeing Rinat Fakhretdinov versus Jack Della Maddalena. And I also wouldn't mind Zaleski dos Santos versus Nicolas Dalby if they wanted to do that.
Yeah, poor old Nicolas deserves probably the Jack Della Maddalena fight, if we're being honest. Yeah, but look, it's difficult. I think you run this one back. I think you've got to run it back. Such a close fight. Two up-and-coming, well, not up-and-coming prospects, two prospects per se. I think.
Like.
What? Yeah, Fakhretdinov is 32. Alessio Zaleski is in his late 30s, I believe.
36.
36. So, I mean, yeah, time is a ticking for Alessio. But, I mean, if you get and you fight to a majority draw, I think you've got to run it back. I think the history shows that the UFC probably will run it back. If it isn't getting run back, I don't mind all that much either. I'd like to see this fight again. I'd like to see an eventual winner. Great fight, great contest. I will end it up in a draw. We'll hopefully find an eventual winner sooner rather than later. Look, we talked about comebacks and we spoke about Dalby. We spoke about Modestas Bukauskas as well, Harry. But, I think there's no other way to describe it other than Modestas Bukauskas ran into an absolute juggernaut in Vitor Petrino on Saturday night, who knocked him out with as sweet as left hook as you will see after the first minute of the second round. And Petrino, in my opinion, is definitely one that we are going to be talking about for quite some time in the light heavyweight division. From what I've seen so far, anyway, Harry, I'm curious to hear what your assessment of the man is. But showcased a very well-rounded level of ability in that fight with Modestas Bukauskas, and to knock out a guy and an esteemed striker like Bukauskas as well, the way he did, massively impressive in my book. Anyway, I'm curious to hear what you think.
I just thought Bukauskas was, from the very, very first exchange, was gun shy. He was very aware of Petrino's power, and he was very aware of not getting caught by it. And unfortunately, when you are that aware of not getting caught by something, you're more likely to get caught by it, right? Because you're not able to get into your natural flow. You're not able to move your head, move your hands as you would usually, and you're going to make reactions that are maybe unnatural for you because of your heightened defensive awarenesses. And like, even in the very first exchange, my first note is that's a beautiful low kick from Modestas, but he's already biting on feints that aren't even being thrown yet, right? And so I really liked the well-roundedness from Petrino. Doesn't throw a lot, but when he does, he lands, and he lands hard. And equally, when he takes the fight down, looks good on the ground as well. The read he made to throw the left hand, knowing that Bukauskas was going to drop his right, was just beautiful.
Yeah,
And
he was timing that quite all fight with the jab. He was throwing that jab out there, and like you said, Modestas was biting on quite a bit, and he was trying to paw away that jab, and it was an excellent read. That was the sole setup for that left hook, really, in round 2. It was set up based off that jab feint, and it was just a really lovely read, and landed to perfection as well. Landed absolutely on the button, and we saw the results of it. Petrino did very well to not follow up with any strikes. It was unnecessary, and as the ref did, to kind of teeter him away from doing so as well. I think it was an excellent job by all parties, and a disappointing one from Modestas. But please continue, sir, with your breakdown.
No. I mean, I was the next thing I was going to say was completely the same as you. Fair play to Petrino for not landing any other shots. I think he took a quick look and wondered whether Goddard was going to step in. Goddard did, and Petrino said, "Yeah, fair play. No worries for me to drop no more shots on there." The name for me is Carlos Ulberg, by the way.
Oh yes, give me that. Give me all of that. On fire, young Powell here. On fire with the matchups tonight. That is a good one. Now, with Petrino, we're coming here. We're talking about a guy who's only 26 years of age as well. We're not in any rush with this guy. And I hope that UFC is not in any rush, because I really and truly think, you know me, I get a little bit excitable every now and again, Harry, and I might get a little bit excitable in what I say next. But I think from the very early stages, based off fighters I've seen at this early stage before, we may be looking at, top contender, if not title challenger in a couple of years in Vitor Petrino. Am I getting too excited, or can you kind of see some early signs from him?
I think you're getting 100% too excited. I am definitely going to call the Jets here. All I'll say is, look, when you're in that weight class, athleticism, size, speed, power is a very, very, very real skill set that will take you a long way. And Petrino has that, right? He certainly has that. He's shown that he's got power on the feet. He's shown that he can take a fight down. So the early boxes for me are certainly checked. And so if we don't want to do Carlos Ulberg immediately, because Carlos Ulberg is a similar man that's rising through that division, I have no problem with that whatsoever, right? But if we want to do it now, then it gives both guys. I mean, Carlos Ulberg is just.
I love the Ulberg fight. I mean, yeah, I think the Ulberg fight would be perfect to make next. But it's like, if he gets a win over Ulberg, what are we doing then? I wouldn't like to see him thrown to the wolves just yet. Like, I mean, there's room for him there in that light heavyweight division, dude, in the rankings. It's not all that. It's fairly top heavy in that division right now, and there's a gap for guys to kind of emerge. And at 26 years of age, I mean, that's 4 years to work on. When he's 30, he's going to have a lot of those skills even more refined, and I'm very, very curious to see how he kind of matches up with some of the top level guys in that division. And I'm all for that Carlos Ulberg fight. I think that would be a sweet, sweet fight. And a fight that I would kind of fancy Petrino to win as well, to be honest. That's why I was kind of saying cool the Jets. But look, let's not get too excited, Carrie. Pouring cold water on my excitement here as we move on to the next fight, which we almost, not almost, we actually exactly predicted how this fight was going to go, Harry, because Angela Hill was in it, and she fought Denise Gomes, and she beat her by unanimous decision. A fight that was likely set up for Denise Gomes to go out and showcase her abilities after a fantastic win over Bruna Brazil. Didn't go her way. Angela Hill came in to prove she's not done yet. She still has a little bit of fight left in her, and she went out and does what Angela Hill does so often, I should say, and that's go out and win a unanimous decision.
Look, Angie Hill makes fighting harder than it needs to be. Like, She, for 115, has some really, really nice Muay Thai teeps, and she has some lovely elbows. She's been working with Justin Flores, who's a judo guy, and has added some really nice additions to some of her clinch work and whatever. But she just always seems to crowd herself when it comes to shots. When it comes to getting to the clinch, she always seems to crowd herself getting there. Getting out, her operation in the clinch is always seemingly crowded. And she just makes fights closer than they necessarily need to be. Now, she was certainly better than Denise Gomes, and she certainly showed that. But she didn't blow out any of the rounds like maybe her technical proficiency should have allowed her to.
She never really does do that. It seems to be a common problem in a lot of her fights, really, isn't it?
Exactly. And so, she definitely deserved the win. There was no controversy this time. There's no split decision going the wrong way or whatever it is. But it's just the age-old story, right? Angela Hill makes fighting more difficult than it needs to be. I'm going to give away the name now just because we're about to talk about them. But it seems like the UFC are using Angela Hill now to build a name off. And so, okay, we've failed with Denise Gomes. If Eduarda Moura can make weight, then let me see Angela Hill, Eduarda Moura, because I am happy to see those two ladies grapple. No problem.
100%. Yeah, I have my thoughts on Moura myself. I would have a name for Angela Hill. Danny McCormack. She wants it. She said it to me in the interview. Let's give it to her. Let's throw Danny straight in there. In the words of Danny McCormack, she reckons Angela Hill goes out there and shadow boxes in front of her opponents. I quote Danny McCormack, I'd like to see her go out there and fucking shadow box in front of me. So I'd like to see that. She sold me on it completely. Head over and check out that interview on SevereMMA YouTube as well if you want to hear more from Danny. But I like that from Danny. We might have to give Danny McCormack the old Paul Hughes treatment as well, and will her position into the UFC into existence. We've still had no luck with Paul yet, but hopefully we can stay doing it. But that brings us to our next fight, Harry, and that is Eduarda Moura, who went out and beat Montserrat Conejo Ruiz savagely easy. My opinion on this fight, Harry, is that it shouldn't have taken place, to be honest. Simply, I think Montserrat Ruiz should have refused to take on Moura, who came in 4.5 pounds, I believe, overweight. Big problems here, and you wanted to see that Angie Hill fight. Talk to me about your performance before we get into the aftermath. But this weight thing is a huge issue for her, Harry. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree, yeah. You can't be coming in and making your UFC debut, not your Endeavor debut, but your UFC debut. You can't be making that sort of a weight miss. You just can't. Now, we know that she can make the weight. She's made the weight a number of times before. That's fine. So we have to give a benefit of a doubt here and say, look, sometimes things happen, especially with females when we're cutting weight. And, I will certainly give the benefit of the doubt, but 4.5 pounds is a massive miss.
It showed so much inside the cage. It was obviously quite a bit larger of a discrepancy inside the cage once everybody had the chance to kind of rehydrate and everything like that, Harry. But I was looking at these two women and I was like, good God, it's like 2 or 3 different weight sizes or weight classes apart here. And it was like, with Montserrat Ruiz, you want to show that you're tough. You want to show that you're game. You want to probably go out there and get the chance to get paid. But at the end of the day, you want to be making better decisions when it comes to that. And if someone misses by 4.5 pounds, no matter what the circumstances are, obviously circumstances are circumstances and things happen, but you're in a moment where you have to make a decision on whether you want to move forward with that fight or whether you don't want to move forward. And I thought Montserrat Ruiz made the wrong decision, and hindsight is a great thing, I guess. But just simply looking at both of them in the cage, I was like, no way should she have taken this fight. But credit to Ruiz, she took it. She got beaten by second round TKO. Was it worth it? I wonder. That's the $1 million question for Montserrat Ruiz. But if Moura can control her weight issues, 10-0 as a prospect in the strawweight division right now. She has potential to make a few waves in that division, but it's this thing that, Harry, that's going to hang over her head for the next couple of fights now. Will she be able to make that 115 pounder? 116 really is all we need her to make before she gets to the championship level. But I don't know. When you're missing weight by that much, that's a big, big miss.
It is. And it's a shame that, given the skills that she's shown in the cage, it's a shame that all we're talking about is the weight miss, right? But, like I said, she's made it before. She made it under the Endeavor banner. So I'm more than happy to see her progress, right? Because she definitely went out and showed some fantastic skills. And so I'm happy to see her progress. But I definitely don't want to see a weight miss again. No more weight misses.
Yeah, 100%. I did say 4.5 over, really 3.5 over if you are going to go by that 116 limit for a non-title fight. So yeah, look, I hope she does. But I'm going to be the one of many that will always have that asterisk beside. I want to see you making weight. I want to see you doing it safely, or not just go up and fight at 125 and do everybody a favor in terms of, how much are you taking out of yourself by getting down that much. And obviously it was a little bit too much, whether it was an injury, whether it was something else going on. We'll probably find that out down the line. But another big one got us going on this card, Harry. Marc Diakiese, we spoke about the importance of this fight for him, of having gone in off the back of 2 straight defeats, coming in there against Kauê Fernandes and just got the job done by split decision. It should not have been a split decision, not at all. I don't know, a bit of dodgy judging going on there, but for me, he won this fight pretty easy. I'm sure his eyebrow was raised, and we've seen his eyebrow raised when the decision was being read out. He went in there and got the job done, used his wrestling, much to DC's surprise, who wasn't even commentating, but I'm sure DC was surprised at home looking at it. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be too critical. I mean, a guy that is on 2-fight losing streak went out there and did what he needed to do to get the job done. Was it flashy? No. Was it exciting? Not really. But you know what? It means that his next fight is going to be in the UFC, and that means a hell of a deal to Marc Diakiese.
Absolutely. And it really felt like he was fighting for his contract too, right? There was a nervousness in the stand-up that's sort of uncommon for Diakiese. He's usually very flowy. Wasn't able to connect with the shots that he usually is able to connect with. But the wrestling was great. Like, the wrestling was great. I thought his reversal of position was good. I thought his domination of position was good. His ability to stick to his game plan was great. His head position was really, really good. Some of the leg weave passing was really great. Some of his, he's a freak athlete, and sometimes you see him do stuff and you're just like, all right, dude, cool. As I've said, I know one of the grappling coaches that Diakiese has, and that grappling coach is a very, very good black belt. And he's like, sometimes you just can't keep hold of him. He just does shit, and you're like, that just shouldn't happen from a human.
Just a supreme athlete. I think we've seen that a lot more from Diakiese in his early career, but obviously, as your career progresses, as the losses tot up, and as you get to higher level competition, of course, being flashy is one thing, but being flashy don't always pay the bills. So he needed to go out and get the job done, and credit to him for doing that as well. He's not afraid to do that. He's not afraid to go back to what gets him to the dance, and he did that against Fernandes, who look, he was all right. But he came in against a much more experienced and a better guy on the night. In Diakiese, and a guy that was fighting for his job. So, I mean, Fernandes will have another crack at lightweight, but it was all about Marc Diakiese. I was delighted for him. Moves to 17-7 in his career right now. Who would you like to see him go up against next?
So, Ishmael Bonfim and Vince Pichel fell off. I think Vince Pichel would have been a banana skill for Ishmael Bonfim, and so I wouldn't mind Vince Pichel versus Marc Diakiese. Vince Pichel's got solid boxing, can stuff a takedown, can land a takedown himself. Now he's getting on a little bit, right? And so whatever. But if you're looking at just giving Marc, because the Joel Alvarez performance for Marc Diakiese was a real shame, right? Like a real.
Yeah. Definitely asterisks over that with the head clash and everything that happened there. So, I mean, you want to. Sorry, you want to give him an opportunity to kind of get back to that kind of scenario again. I think Vince Pichel is a good one to do that. That's probably what you were going to say. Sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. And if that's the UFC's prerogative and they want to build, because Diakiese sells well in Europe, right? He's a name. People like him. You could run the Timu Pakalan finish and all of these sorts of things. So, it's a name that the UFC should be looking to invest in. And, Why not give him something to give him just a nice enough leg up, and then maybe we can do the Joel Alvarez rematch, right? Like I wouldn't mind seeing that in a couple of fights.
100%. The way it's kind of been for Diakiese over the last number of years since 2019 is 2 wins, 2 losses, 2 wins, 2 losses, and now he's back in the win column. I'd like to see him being able to put together a win streak, because I think without the pressure on his back of him losing his job, I think, we will see a much better fighter in there, and much more I'm not going to say a much more well-rounded. He's already well-rounded, but like I said, you've got to do what you got to do. You're not going to go out there and kickbox a guy with a chance of losing the fight and losing your contract. You know where you're stronger in the wrestling. You take the fight down, and I'll never criticize a guy in his situation. I might criticize other guys for doing it, but not a guy in his situation where he needed to get the job done. And speaking of getting the job done, we got the job done on another balance breakdown. It was fantastic to break down these fights with Harry. Like I said, lots of talking points, lots to discuss, and lots of future prospects that we'll be looking forward to seeing that have fought on this card. Look at Jailton Almeida. Whatever you think of the performance, he's going to be thereabouts in the heavyweight division for quite some time. We have Caio Borralho going to move up the middleweight rankings. Elves Brener, good showing. Rinat Fakhretdinov perhaps, or if he can get over, if he does challenge Elizeu Zaleski the next time, might move on up there. Of course, Vitor Petrino, as well as others as well, including Eduarda Moura. All prospects coming up in Brazil. The future is looking bright in Brazil at Sao Paulo. That's the balance breakdown. Follow Harry Powell at BJJ_Harry Powell. At IONeil MMA is where you'll find me. Until the next time, take care. Look after yourselves.